The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Welcome back here to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always here, I'm your host, Calvin Glen Alexander. And on this episode of the podcast, we're previewing the Baylor game this weekend. So I've got none other than Jake Carlson, fellow OSU alum, and frequent friend of the podcast here, joining me as well. Jake, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. You know, it's lunchtime, so
Yeah, get a good lunch break podcast in here, while we're getting excited for basically a top 25 showdown in Waco, Texas, which not my favorite place to play. Not my favorite place to see an OSU game, I got to say.
no, it's Waco. That's all I can really say about it, right?
I've seen a couple of games in Waco. I've seen a 2016 game where OSU lost 35-24, and Jim Grobe was the head coach. And then I think the other game I saw was in 2014 when Baylor had their largest margin of victory against Oklahoma State, and they won 49-28. So not a big fan of those. But on the other hand, I have seen Oklahoma State just absolutely blow out Baylor in 2017, 59-16, and I didn't see the 2020 game. I don't think that was a 42-3 game when Dave Aranda's the head coach, but Oklahoma State won 42-3.
What was the one where Katie Cannon had like 400 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns?
I think that's the 2016 game.
That was in
touchdowns.
Stillwater. He didn't have 8
Stillwater.
touchdowns, but it was in Stillwater. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, it's probably the 2015 game then, because Baylor won that 45-35, and that was the Stillwater win.
Yeah.
But Baylor does good. Baylor does pretty good. I mean, as of late here, of course, Baylor won the neutral site game, Big 12 championship. And then before then, of course, we won last season. And then we won in 2020, which I don't think I went to that game. But then Baylor does okay. They do okay in at home, I guess, against us relatively recently. Because, man, the all-time, do you know what the current all-time head-to-head here is in the matchup?
I do not. Is it close?
It is. It's fairly close here. Yeah. OSU's up 22 wins, and Baylor has 19 wins head-to-head, of course, there. And then largest margin of victory, Oklahoma State has that easily, but it was more than 100 years ago. It was in 1914, and OSU has that 60-0. And we actually have the largest margin of victory most recently as well, too, because that's the 2020 42-3 game. Or Dave Aranda, I think in the Baylor Bears went like 0-12 or something, just absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
So
right after was that after Matt Rule left, right?
Yep. That's right after Matt Rule left. Yeah.
So it was the 2015 Baylor game. I looked it up. Katie Cannon had 5 receptions, 210 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And it was their backup quarterback that played half the game.
Well, I got to say this from after watching the Big 12 championship, if Baylor just has their starter play, we're good. We're usually pretty good against Baylor's starter, Like if they don't have an injury mid-game where all of a sudden it changes our scheme of what we're looking for, I think we're doing pretty darn good. So I take that.
It's like when when someone puts in a rookie pitcher and you've never seen him before, and
there's no tape. Yeah,
he's just out there dealing. And they're like, well, he sucked in AAA. And I'm like, okay, he's dealing now. I don't know what to tell you.
He might suck in 4 games from now and for the rest of his career, but he's good today. That's what matters is the game today. I don't know.
Right.
Do you want to guess who has the most first-round draft picks? Baylor or Oklahoma State? It's a trick question. We're tied. We both have 21.
21. I'm surprised Baylor's that high.
Yeah, but I think about their draft picks for a little bit. I'm like, okay, all right. They've had a couple of receivers as of late. Of course, they have Robert Griffin. Yeah, and then I'm honestly surprised that we're that high, especially as of recently too. So we both have a couple of same stats here that are the same as well too. Actually, I think one other stat that's the exact same is that neither Oklahoma State nor Baylor has ever been ranked number 1 in the AP poll. But only 43 teams have ever been ranked in the AP poll because we're both tied for 44th in the country. I think that's how the math works here. So
I
yeah.
saw something completely unrelated. It was a question on Reddit, and it was on Reddit, the college football thread, and someone said, "What is the biggest conspiracy theory about college football that you have?" And people were listing some off the wall stuff, and I was like, I think probably the OSU one would have to be still playing that Iowa State game,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's the weirdest. Not waiting a day or anything. I wait until
Because
Saturday to play the game.
yeah, because my thing, how many people actually play that game? How many? Like, how many teams would be forced to play that game? And I know that's kind of off topic, but like what you said made me think of it. How many, like would Georgia be forced to play that game?
And so just I want to just make sure we're both on the same page here because 2011, the game against Iowa State on the Friday night game, where we had 4
Yeah.
members of the Oklahoma State basketball family, 2 coaches, I mean the head coach of Oklahoma State basketball and his assistant head coach, both tragically passed away in a plane crash. That was, I mean, yeah, I don't know how many teams would the next day still be playing a football game. And I know it's not the same sport, but it still is the same school, and everyone knows it's just that was a really weird game. And now when you look back on it, like in revisionist history here, it's basically a wait, why did we play? Like,
Right. And I didn't say it, as to be like disrespectful or
yeah,
anything. Like
yeah, no,
that was it.
I'm well aware. Yeah,
But I remember reading that and I was like, that's probably one of the bigger ones. And, because you hear people all the time say, oh, well, this is bigger than football. This is bigger than this. That's bigger than playing a freaking football game, as we know. And I hate to like boil it down, but the conspiracy theory would be forcing us to play that game, albeit should we have lost? Probably not, just if you look at it on paper. But the circumstances were not good just in a football scope, right?
yeah, and well, there's a lot of things too where it's like, actually, did the field goal go in? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff like that where it's like, well, maybe Oklahoma State actually just won the game fair and square, but the officials couldn't tell in the uprights. And there's enough screenshots that Oklahoma State fans and all the bias that I want to pour into Oklahoma State football will show. Actually, Oklahoma State had a good chance of actually, having a good
Yeah.
argument here, at least that we won. I do want to get into, of course, this weekend's here and just go through a couple different stats just to keep everyone updated here since I've been doing that for the previews. Points per game, Oklahoma State is first in the country average points per game. Of course, we played no one so far, so go figure. But we have 51.7 points per game on average. Baylor is 22nd at 40.5. Then defensively for points allowed, it's kind of the opposite story here. We are 57th in the country, allowing 22.7 points per game. Baylor is allowing 16.8 points per game. Total yards, we're blowing Baylor out of the water. 511 yards averaged a game to Baylor's 431. Passing yards a game, we're averaging 348 to Baylor's 224. Rushing yards, Baylor's got us there. They have 206. Oklahoma State has 163. And then yards game allowed, we have been allowing on average 376 yards a game. Baylor's only been allowing 305, which the rankings there, like Baylor's 25th in the country in that stat. We're 70th in the country, and we're talking about 70 yards difference. So that's odd. And then turnover differential on the season so far, for every single turnover, we're -1, Baylor's +1. That's a little concerning when I think about it because we haven't played anyone. Baylor technically has played one team. They lost
Yeah.
that game, and their field goal kicker couldn't make the field goal because otherwise they would have won. But that's BYU at BYU on a crazy game. So
Yeah.
just want to run through the stats here. Last couple here is the season record. We're 3-0. Baylor's 3-1 because we had a bye week, and Baylor lost to BYU. Record versus the spread, we're 0-3. Baylor's 1-3. So
We're 0-3 versus the spread.
yeah. Yeah. I'm
I
gonna
feel like
guess that University Arkansas Pine Bluff game was like a 70-point spread or something
it
crazy
was
that there's
like,
just no way it was covering. Maybe
let
50
me
plus.
What was
I'll
the
let you
final
look it
score?
up though. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
let you
What
look
was
it up though.
it was 63-7. That was the final score.
Yep. So we didn't cover a spread in a 63-7 game. Oh my gosh.
The spread was 54.5.
So
The over-under was 63.5, which we almost beat by ourselves.
well, yeah. We're half a
I
point away
mean,
from beating by ourselves.
yeah.
Basically. I mean, the
This
Texas Tech game is sold out. Homecoming sold out against Texas. Both those games are not like both those games are our next couple of home games here, but
well,
that's awesome.
we beat the
What
spread
can you
on
say?
Arizona State. It was 11.5 on
Oh, we
Caesars.
did. So
Yeah.
maybe wherever Bleach Report's pulling this from is just a little bit different because that's where I'm getting these stats from here.
Yeah.
But all right, so end of the day, how you feeling about this game? Feel good, bad, questionable?
This game is always really hard. Like ever since I've been an OSU fan, this game's really hard.
Yeah, no
For
question.
both teams, like just in general. Um, I don't think Baylor is as good this year as they were last year. But I also don't think we are as good this year as we were last year. I think
Definitely
as
defensively.
definitely
Definitely
defensively.
defensively.
Offensively, we might be better, which is great considering, it's like if we were to play a Big Ten team, right? Like you've got
Yeah.
two cars going same way with little resistance. So our defense isn't as great. Baylor's offense isn't as great. Our offense is good. Baylor's defense is good. That kind of thing. But we beat Baylor both times last year if our quarterback does not have 9 turnovers in 2 games.
Or if we score 1 point in 7 tries at the goal line, right? Like,
That
and
as
I
well.
shouldn't
That
say
is
1 point. I should be saying 4, right? Because
yeah,
we couldn't have kicked a field goal a couple of those
right.
times. So I want to say, like, this Oklahoma State team, I think Baylor's in the opposite situation from us as far as I think they've gotten better defensively. They have a defensive lineman who I keep hearing all over the country is like, oh my gosh, how's Oklahoma State's offensive line going to be able to stop him? And I I think their I think their defense has gotten really good defensively, at least on the line.
I mean,
But
Dave Aranda's great defensively, just
yeah,
objectively. So,
but I think their offense has gotten worse. I mean, they could not put up points against BYU. And I'm not saying BYU's an easy team to play, but they were not putting up points, right?
yeah.
So take that for what it is. BYU is better than Arizona State, right? Fair. Say that.
BYU is
That's
better
the only.
than all the teams we played. I mean, that's
Yeah, but I'm trying to put the apples to apples at least a little
oh,
bit
yeah.
here, like a Power 5 team. Now, Herm Edwards, the head coach of Arizona State's gone. What's funny is you and I actually will see Arizona State play this Saturday against SC. But the the Baylor Bears, like they always worry me. Like you said, it's always a nervous, frustrating game of, oh my gosh. The game that we lost in 2016, Baylor, there was like a huge lightning delay for like like an hour plus or whatever during that stopped the game in Waco, and then it comes back on, and then all of a sudden we lose. And that's the year that we have like Mason Rudolph and a bunch of guys. And listen, like stuff happens. Like that happens to college teams. We should have still hung on and won and being that Baylor team. That's the same year, I believe, that we just had a bunch of other stuff go wrong. And then we ended up playing in well, that was the year we ended up playing the Sugar Bowl, wasn't it? 2016. So
Yeah.
all is well. Like the season actually ended being like, oh man, all right, we're not too bad. But man, I I am always nervous against Baylor. Right?
And
Always worried.
yeah, and the talking point for this game is you have a top 20 matchup and
Mhm.
you have a quarterback who is returning, who has looked very good and played horribly in 2 games against Baylor last year. I mean, the talking point. I saw something where like half of Spencer Sanders' turnovers over the last like 3 years have come in those 2 games.
I believe it.
And it's like a third out of his entire career all came in those 2 games because it was like 8 or 9. I have to imagine, which kind of makes me a little less nervous, that he's going to come out with like a chip on his shoulder. Because in all fairness to him, that is how he's played this year. Just a little bit more edgy, less timid. You know, he's making the smart decisions. He's throwing the ball away, even against. I mean, we're playing cupcakes, right? I mean, we played cupcakes, but
Yeah, he
you know,
was pulled halfway through the second quarter against UAPB
yeah, but
because
he's even even throwing the ball away against them because he's like, I'm not going to force it. What's the point? Which,
which
if
is
you're going to do it
great.
against, which is great. If you're going to do it against them, you're definitely going to do it against Baylor.
Yeah. Well, and the Oklahoma State like article that's emailed out here or put on at least on their website here that I'm finding is OSU has won 19 of the past 27 matchups against Baylor. In Waco, the Bears hold a 9-7 record all time against the Cowboys. But in OSU's last trip, that's when we handily defeated them 42-3, led by Spencer Sanders 347 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. But then you talk about last season, and last season's like the opposite of that game, basically. We scored 24 in the first game, only let Baylor score 14, only allowed 14 points. And then when we play them again, we lose 21-16. And basically, because more or less we could not score on them. Like Sanders made too many mistakes, and we could not figure out a way to score against them, which is so frustrating because it's Baylor. Like, I'm used to the Big 12 still, and this is going to take just some mental changes in my head at least, but I'm used to still the Oklahoma State teams of old of like scoring 40 plus a game, where you and I go through a score prediction. We're going, I think maybe 34 and both. And then later on, you're like, well, actually, no, I want to up that to 41 or something. Like, I want to add another touchdown. Now it's the Oklahoma State team of maybe we are back to scoring a bunch of points again, because last year that was not our MO, right? So this is the big interesting part of the matchup to me is that Dave Aranda's a really good head coach, really good defensive head coach. Gundy's a really, really good head coach, and he's a good offensive head coach. When we face our first tough physical team, right? This is not like a team we faced before. We faced 3 cupcakes. We faced the easiest part so far. We kept everyone healthy going into the bye week and through the bye week, it seems, knock on wood here. But can we pull off what is an upset? I think Baylor last time I saw is favored by 2.5 to 3 points, depending on what you're looking at.
Yeah, and that RPI whatever on ESPN has them like 70% chance to win or something like that.
Yeah, and Baylor is the number 16 team in the country. Like, we're number 9. I'm shocked College Game Day didn't go to Waco, to be honest.
I'm not going to get into the rankings. NC State should not be ranked. They're a bad football team. But
and Kansas should be ranked by far and away. Kansas should be at least be the 20th team in the country from everything we've seen.
NC State is number 10 right now, so they can market it as a top 10 matchup, just like they did last week with Florida and Tennessee. Florida should not have been ranked. They just shouldn't have. But we know how they do this. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
The one thing that I wanted to get into is we played Blake Shapen before in the Big 12 championship game last year. He looked, again, guns blazing. His first 18 throws, he completed his first 18 throws or whatever. And,
if Blake Shapen was a junior, he should have left that. He should have not played in the bowl game afterwards and gone to the NFL and just used only that tape.
Yeah.
Because that was the best I've seen a guy live who I've never seen play college football before. Never watched highlights on him. Backup quarterback. Gary Bohannon, the starting quarterback for Baylor, transferred out during the offseason because Blake Shapen won the starting job, I guess, against him. And if you're saying, okay, how do you win the starting job? Because of that Oklahoma State game where, by the way, Baylor only scored 21 points. Like, I kind of gets lost on this because, like you said, dude was 18 of 18 or in a row or something crazy. Like,
and they scored all their Didn't they
Yeah.
score all their points in the first half?
I want to say they did, but even if they didn't, the things I took away from that game was that Chapin basically could do whatever he wanted to in the first half. They put up
Yeah.
points like just easy, it seemed. And I'm shocked it was looking back at the score here, it was only 21 points. Because I have not wanted to relive that game in any shape, form, or fashion at all since it happened.
No.
But 21 points, like, you're right. They scored all 21 points in the first half because basically after we fell behind 21-3 in the second quarter, we rallied back and had a chance to take the lead, but were held short on the goal line, fourth down, less than 30 seconds remaining in the
How
game.
many
It's the Oklahoma
turnovers did
State line.
How many turnovers did Sanders have?
Give me a second here, but there's a lot of, oh my gosh, is Oklahoma State really good? Because we're ninth in the country. Do you think we deserve to be 9 in the country? You're saying NC State's 10 in the country and they haven't played anyone. We haven't played anyone either, right?
Yeah. The Oklahoma State is ranked highly because of preseason rankings. Because
Yes.
I mean, we haven't played a tougher schedule than Kansas or, insert team here that people go complain about on social media.
Right.
But we've also played a tougher schedule than Ole Miss, who almost lost to Tulane or Tulsa or whatever.
Is
So
Arizona State tougher than them?
yeah.
Okay. All right.
I
Cool.
I think they're just a Power 5 team. I would adhere on the side of
Yeah.
being a Power 5 team than a Conference USA.
I always want to agree in this estimation here. I'm just
Yeah.
reluctant to do so.
So I think OSU deserves to be number 9 because preseason rankings are purely based on the previous year. As much as people don't want to tell you that, they're
Mhm.
purely based on the previous year. But we've also had teams jumping us just because they're from a better conference, even though their schedule still sucks.
Well, the only rankings that matter are the college football playoff rankings.
Right.
We've seen this
Right.
year over year, and I will give them the college football committee. I will give them a ton of respect because they don't do rankings till November. Like they don't
Yeah.
do rankings until you're midway through the season at least. There's been some games played. There's been some crap has gone down, right? And that's the part where I'm like, all right, like I get excited when I see those because at least one, it does mean something. And two, it's like, all right, you know what? Like how does this shape out?
Yeah. And
Last year, just to give you the stat here, because I have it real quick for Baylor.
yeah.
Spencer Sanders had 7 interceptions last year against the Baylor Bears combined in both games. He had 3 in the first game and 4 in the championship. And we still only lost by 5. That does make me feel a lot better about this team going into this year, I got to say.
Yeah. So, we can do a rankings podcast,
Yeah,
maybe this weekend or something.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
But
Control involved will be good.
one thing I wanted to get to is talking a little bit more about Chapin here.
Mhm.
Because for all intents and purposes, beat us, right? Like he beat us last year.
Showed us up. Yep.
Yeah. But one thing that I think goes in our favor is he's not a runner, which benefits our defensive line immensely. Because I would probably say, as a lot of people have said, that our defensive line is one of the best in the country, just on paper. I don't know about statistically and all that stuff, but on paper, we have like a bunch of 24-year-olds and then an AP freshman All-American. So like we, it's a bunch of old dudes on there and then an All-American.
Yeah.
So good. I would assume that it's probably better than BYU's line. No offense to BYU, but I would assume it's probably better than BYU. BYU's line had 4 sacks,
Mhm.
and those 4 rushes were the only time Chapin rushed all game. So in college football, as everyone knows, it goes down as a rushing stat, whereas in the NFL it doesn't. I don't know why, but Chapin was sacked. Let's say that a bunch of times fast. Chapin was sacked 4 times for negative 22 yards.
Good.
In all of
need.
his other game against Iowa State, he had 7 attempts for 3 yards, which I would obviously presume that he got sacked some of those. And then he had 3 rushes for 42 yards against Texas State and 4 rushes for 11 yards against Albany. So basically, of the Power 5 teams that they played, he is averaging negative 19 yards rushing on 11 carries.
And I think the point you're getting to, right, is our defensive line's pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't played anyone that great yet. Our defensive line seems to be pretty darn freaking awesome, which clearly I'm not saying the F-bomb here.
But it's all the
But-
same guys that were killing it last year against,
Except
NFL players.
we add on Trace Ford.
Except we had on Trace because he was
Add
hurt,
on Trace
right.
Ford because he was hurt the whole last year. And I'm trying to find the stat here on how many sacks we've had this year, because that would be okay. Like, how have we been doing? That'd be an awesome stat to see.
Yeah.
I'm really tentative to pick Oklahoma State here, but you know what? I'm gonna just go ahead and say, yeah, I think we win. I think it's super, super close, but I think we win. Now we have given up 10 sacks this year against no one.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like we talk about Baylor sacks, and because I'm looking for the other one, right?
Our line is not great, nor is our rushing.
Yeah.
That's
time possession too. We're averaging less time possession. Now, clearly that is because the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff game, I think, just throws a lot of stuff out the window, right?
Yeah.
But man, sacks, we've had, let's see, opponents have had 3 sacks for 16 yards lost. We've had 10 sacks for 52 yards lost. Am I reading that correctly? Maybe we've had 10 sacks and we've given up 3. Maybe that's because the
we've only
that
been
make more sense.
So Sanders has only been sacked twice, and Gunnar Gundy has been sacked once, and that's
the stat here. So we've actually. So I want to correct myself here as quickly as I can on that. We've made 10 sacks this year for a total, for the opponent losing 52 yards, and we've only given up 3 sacks. So okay, I feel a lot better here.
The big concern that I would say, now it might not be a big concern because we might not even do it, is running the ball. As a team, we have not reached 500 rushing yards. Granted, Spencer Sanders almost has 8,000 passing yards. So take that with a grain of salt. Take that however you want, because Spencer Sanders is our second leading rusher. He already has over 1,000 total yards in, how many quarters? How many quarters has he played?
He hasn't played a
10?
fourth quarter yet. Yeah, he hasn't played a fourth quarter yet, I don't think.
Maybe 9 quarters?
Actually, Arizona State,
Yeah.
I think he did play some of the fourth quarter, but still.
So I think we will probably be throwing the ball a good amount against Baylor. That's my assumption. The way that I don't want to be that person to do the prediction of where you're sitting on both sides. Yeah, I absolutely am. If we win, I think it'll be a blowout.
Oh, I don't think that at all.
If we win. If Baylor wins, I think it'll be, late field goal, late touchdown, something like that. Baylor doesn't have the firepower to blow us out, but we do.
That's fair. I no matter what think we'll win, but I think we could either win really close or really big. I do not see a situation here where Baylor puts up a lot of points on us, and
Right.
I think that's what I would take away here.
And
No matter
that's
what,
the
I
main
think
point
that
I'm
leans
getting at.
towards
Yeah.
because I don't think we're going to give up a lot of points. No matter what, I think we'll be in the game the whole game, and that's why I would pick us to. That's why I'm picking us to win. It's because at the end of the day, there's a really good chance that we could be really close and win the game, or just score 3 touchdowns in the first quarter or first and second quarter, or whatever, while they only score a touchdown and 3 points, and just keep it moving. Because, as I said to start out the podcast, Blake Shapen looked like a god amongst men for the first quarter of that game, the Big 12 championship game. But it's because there was no tape on him. We didn't know what, did we know? We probably did. We probably had enough tape and yada, woulda, shoulda. because we have like the best defense in the Big 12 last year. We had the best defense in basically the country, if you look at some stats correctly, or I
Yeah.
should say just skewed towards OSU's way. They're the best defense in the country last year. But with all that being said, our defense is still pretty darn good. It's not really great in the back end, but you know what? Like a guy who gets sacked a lot and gives up a lot of weird passes, Oklahoma State team that has a lot of game tape on him. What I'd be worried about is that Baylor is just able just to get the ball. Just they basically game plan for a lot of dump off routes, just to immediately get the ball out outside of the defensive line as quick as possible can. Do some wide receiver screens. Their wide receivers are generally speaking pretty physical, fast, athletic dudes, which is what you
Yeah.
want for
Yeah.
a team to run some screens. And if their wide receivers can basically just throw one block, we could see, man, Baylor put up some points early. I just don't think that'll happen the whole game. And
It's not going
Trey
to look like Notre
Sports,
Dame.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
like Notre Dame last year. Jack Cohn is objectively not a very good quarterback. He's a below average quarterback that played with a really good defense. So Notre Dame won a lot of football games. Jack Cohn had 500 yards against us last year. Probably the most he's ever had in his life by 200 yards. I'm making that up. But
well,
point
and
is,
almost all of it was in the first quarter and second quarter, too.
yeah. And Derek Mason doesn't seem like he does the same thing that I always blank on his name.
Jim Knowles?
That Jim Knowles did, where, and we talked about this a lot last year. So if you listened last year, you would have heard us say that Jim Knowles kind of gives. Like his early game plan is to give. He gives, and then you're not getting nothing, which is what he did against Baylor. It's what he did against Notre Dame. Now, Jim Knowles can't prepare for 8 turnovers from our quarterback, right?
7 in 2 games against Baylor. Definitely 4. I mean, 4 turnovers, and that's what would really worry me. 4 turnovers against Baylor last year for Spencer Sanders, 4 interceptions, too.
Yeah.
That's
But did Jim Knowles coach in the Notre Dame game?
I can't remember. I think so. I don't know. I can't remember.
I
I wish
can't
I
remember
knew.
if he did either. I feel like he
I f
did.
yeah,
But
I feel like he did, and we were still trying to do contract negotiations with him in the offseason.
but Notre Dame threw the ball 68 times. 68 in a football game. Notre Dame. That's a lot for anybody. That might be the most passing attempts from a Notre Dame quarterback ever. And that one I'm not actually joking about.
I think you're right. Yeah. That was crazy.
So I say all that to say, we've given up the points. We've given up a little bit, and then we're able to take it. Now it just depends on if our offense can pull that slack, which I think this year is the reciprocal. You have to go foot on the gas all the time, which it appears this year that Casey Dunn is calling plays. So that's fantastic, because there's a lot of different looks that I'm seeing that I haven't seen in the past. I would like to stop giving up garbage time touchdowns, which it seems like we've been very good at this year, other than Pine Bluff. But I mean, Central Michigan scored like 14 points or something in the fourth quarter, and we were up by.
Well, that score, I've heard a couple of different podcasts. I think Joel Klatt and a couple others have said, "Oh my gosh, the Oklahoma State team, like, what are they doing? They gave up 44 points to Central Michigan." It's like the game was over. And
Yeah,
to be clear, Central Michigan is not great, not a good team. Them scoring 44 points is a lot of points for us to give up, period. But by that point, stars have been pulled. Guys were getting breaks. We scored 44 in the first half. Then we only scored 14 in the second half, whereas Central Michigan scored so many points basically as we let them back into the game. It's
they
not
scored
close.
22 points in the fourth quarter. 22 points in the fourth quarter, and we were up.
Well, 22. So they had 22. Yeah, we were up 58-22.
Yeah, 58-22, 51-22, somewhere in that range, because we scored another touchdown. But that should be more telling that, like, hey, the dogs were called off, right?
For sure.
And
For sure.
but that's also one of those things that can come back to benefit you, right? That you rested your guys late and that kind of stuff. So I have to imagine that.
Last podcast I did before the game preview was with Joel, and his point the entire podcast was, we talked about the Oklahoma State stuff, was just don't get injured. Go into the bye week healthy. This is like a mini bye week against UAPB. Go on the bye week healthy. You and I talked about it last week on the podcast we did over the bye week stuff. That's the motto. It's a bye week. Go into the bye week with the bye week mindset of just as long as everyone's healthy, we'll be all right. Seems like, knock on wood here, I should insert that as like a sound effect almost, but stay healthy, because the other team I'm rooting for, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can tell what shirt I'm wearing, cannot stay healthy. So you got to just be healthy to win the games.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see this Oklahoma State game this weekend, because I think it'll be a fun game, and I do think we'll win. I'll ask you here, score prediction before we end this one out.
38-24 OSU.
Ooh. I really like the amount of points there. 38 points sounds really good. I'm gonna say 34-21, almost the exact Arizona State score.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say 34-21, and yeah, I feel good about it. I feel really good about the game. I think we'll find a good place to watch it up here in LA.
Yep.
And Jake, as always, thanks so much for joining here on the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, the CGA Tour. Please review and rate on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you hear the podcast. And feel free to shoot me a message, hit up a question for CGA Tour, so you can ask a question of, what do you guys think about the game? Is there any other questions you have? Just shoot us any questions you have, basically, here for a podcast. We'd love to do like a viewer and listener podcast. I think that'd be fun overall. So
absolutely.
Thanks so much again, and we'll catch you guys again soon. Peace.
See ya.